Welcome to SF Commercial Property Conversations with Bruce Bean, where Bay Area investments meet expert insights. Get ready to unlock the strategies of commercial real estate success.
So today we have Anthony DellaPelle with us, and Anthony is an attorney that represents all sorts of eminent domain situations and tax appeals. So Anthony, it's great to have you. I just kind of love to hear how you got into becoming an attorney.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you and to chat today. I guess what I can do is give you a little bit of an overview of how I got where I am. Now having been a lawyer for about 38 years, I didn't think I was going to be a lawyer. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I went to college to be a pre-med, and that didn't work out. So eventually I found my way into law school after I graduated. And I always had connections to real estate. When I was younger, my dad was a real estate broker. My wife, who I met in college, is from a real estate family. And I got jobs, for the most part, in real estate related work during the summers when I was in school. And when I went to law school, I went locally in New Jersey, where I live and work, at night. And I had real estate jobs. I was a real estate paralegal, and I was a title searcher. And I started my law practice doing transactional real estate work and land use and zoning work, which I did for the first 10 or 11 years as a lawyer, before I changed my focus and moved into the real estate valuation work, which I've done since the mid-90s.
That's fantastic. So we were talking, just to kind of bring the Bay Area in, we were talking about the situation with the Oakland Raiders in the late 70s. So that was an interesting case. Maybe you could just review that for us, because it led into a situation for you.
Sure. So football fans will remember that in the 70s or early 80s, Al Davis moved the Oakland Raider football team to Los Angeles, and that effort was met with some resistance by the city of Oakland. And the legal teams that were involved in those things actually were created because there was a group of lawyers at that time who were property rights lawyers, and the city of Oakland was attempting to use eminent domain to take the team. Because eminent domain can be used for real property and personal property, and the team is personal property or intellectual property, if you want to call it. It's a combination of those things. And there was a group of lawyers, most of whom went to law school in the 60s at Yale together, that bound together and worked on this together. And what grew out of that effort was an organization called Owners Council of America, which exists today, and it has one property rights lawyer per state elected. I am the New Jersey representative. I am the successor in New Jersey to one of my former partners who was part of that original group, who passed away several years ago, and I succeeded him about 15 years ago as our New Jersey representative. So it's been a great organization for me. It's a great resource for me and my firm, and for our clients, because we can facilitate opportunities for them to be in the right hands around the country with top eminent domain lawyers around the country.
So you're also part of Council of Real Estate, which I was not familiar with previous to our conversation. So it'd be interesting if you would explain that to our audience.
Sure. So the Councils of Real Estate is an organization that has been around since the 1950s. And it is an invitation-only organization that is made up of real estate professionals who provide counseling services to their clients or their constituents. And that can be or take shape in any form or fashion. For instance, I am a lawyer, and even though the organization is called Counselors of Real Estate, we're not all lawyers. Less than 10% of our 1,000 members are lawyers, but we do have about 1,000 members around the world. It's an international organization. Our members reside in 22 countries, and we are involved in about 60 different disciplines in the real estate industry. And many of the members are part of a regional or local chapter. So For instance, for your audience, if it's primarily people in Northern California, there's a Northern California chapter with maybe 20 or 30 of our CREs. In New Jersey, I have about 50 of us. In New York City, there's about 120. And the members are working in professions like law, appraisal. There are economists. There are asset managers for large institutional real estate owners and managers, property managers. We have people involved in lending communities, both for banks and for other sources of financing. We have developers. We have people do zoning and planning work, engineers, planners, architects, brokers. So you name it. It's a great way in which all of us can broaden our horizons and learn more from each other. And we do help each other with information, referrals. We teach a lot. We do have a lot of members who are professors at most of the master's real estate programs around the country and in Europe as well. And our international members are actually growing in number in the past 10 years or so. It's one of our goals to get more members internationally. So we just opened a chapter in Asia last year. We have a chapter in Europe. We are hoping to open a chapter in South America that is likely to be tied either to Mexico City or Sao Paulo, where most of the growth is occurring, at least in South America and in Latin America. And I got very involved in the organization. I was actually the global chair of the board of directors of the organization last year. And I had to go around the country and meet with our members. And I presented one of our initiatives in various settings external to the organization. I presented our annual survey of the top 10 issues of real estate, which is released every fall. So I was presenting starting this past fall up until my term ended at the end of December to various organizations, including the National Association of Realtors annual meeting in Boston. I was there and I spoke to about 15,000 people there. So it's a really, really great way to be connected to top real estate people around the world. And we have other things that we do that make us unique. One of them, aside from the top 10 issues in real estate, is that we have an initiative called the Consulting Corps, where if you are a public agency or a nonprofit or a school and you have a real estate problem, you can ask if we can help you and submit a proposal. And then if we agree, we will come out to you for a week and assign a team of about a half a dozen members from different parts of the country and from different disciplines. And we will meet with the stakeholders, inspect the area that has the issue, whatever it is, and then come up with solutions and deliver a presentation and then write a report. So I actually just did my first Consulting Corps assignment last December. I was in Evansville, Indiana, which is in southern Indiana on the Ohio River. And its real estate problem was that it had an area that used to be a crossroads for commerce and then had fallen into almost a blighted condition, and they couldn't figure out why. So we came in, spent a week there, met with the mayor, we met with different stakeholders from the private sector and the public sector, and came up with a bunch of different recommendations as to how they could revitalize the area. And that report was delivered in January to an audience of about 100 people out there in Evansville, and we donate our time for that work. And the program is endowed, and there are different ways in which all of the expenses can be paid. There are travel expenses and lodging and all that for us, but there are grants that are given to help defray that, so that the organization that's asking for our services doesn't have to write a check if they want to try to find these other sources of funding. I really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it. It's a way for us to give back to communities. And if you've got a school that has extra land, or a church doesn't know what to do with it, that they might be donated land, right? Because that happens a lot in estate planning. What do you do with those properties with oil reserves and mineral reserves? What do you do with them? How do you turn it into something that matters to you and your community? And we can help you with that. So One of the several different initiatives that we do, and we enjoy, and our members really value a lot. And I'm so happy that I went on one, and I'm upset that it took me almost 15 years as a member of the organization before I signed up for one. So now I want to go on another one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, so that it brings up an interesting question about what do you find right now are sort of the top issues in commercial real estate?
Well, our top 10 issue report is online available. It's under the website for the organization, CRE.org. Very easy to find it. If you just go to CRE.org and then on the top you go to initiatives, there's a drop down and it'll take you to the top 10.
Wow.
I don't have it in front of me, but I will tell you what the number one issue was last year, and this was something that was finalized in August of last year, and we started to announce it in September. The top issue was the impact of global elections on the real estate market. And this was before the election here.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it was before some other very important elections in Europe and in other places.
Oh, you're right.
So I think we might have even understated its importance, even though it was the number one issue. Because if you see what's going on now, it's not something as simple as how does the change or changes in the debt markets affect the commercial real estate market. There's so many things built into that that are related to it, right? We went through that change in the debt markets, in mid 22 for the next year, where everything doubled and tripled, and now there's all this, I guess, uncertainty about what to do as these commercial loans mature. That's one of the top 10 issues too, how to handle the repurposing of the commercial loan debt, because it's a $1.5 trillion that's going to be due in the next year and a half.
Wow.
At higher rates, which is going to close the gap and change your margins on your investments. But other things that are related to that are what I'll call the affordable housing dilemma. That's one of the top 10 issues. How do you solve it, knowing that part of the market still has a dramatic shortfall in supply around this country, and different states do it differently. So there are a variety of others. I would say that the common overlapping issues have to do with impact of politics on the economy and real estate, the growing emergence of artificial intelligence and how it's used in real estate is another one. So the advancements of technology as a broad topic. And then I think that the last thing that's kind of filtering through all of the top 10 issues that some people may not pay attention to all the time would be the changing demographics, at least of this country, both geographically and from a population standpoint, because we have the largest part of our population, that being the millennial generation, now starting to take over. I think you're probably a baby boomer like me.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
So, we're almost out to pasture, aren't we?
Yes.
And those of us who are still working see them coming, and they are replacing us, they being young people and machines, right? So those demographics change things, because if there's a 37-year-old person managing a multi-billion-dollar real estate portfolio, they're going to do it differently than a 67-year-old person, right? They communicate differently, they interact differently, they think differently, they use different tools, and just that is going to have impacts, as does the demographic changes from a geographic standpoint, which were already in place before the pandemic started, but were then accelerated greatly because of the pandemic. Where I have a 33-year-old daughter and son-in-law who both still work in New York but live in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, exactly.
I never knew how that might work, but they've been there 3 years now, and it's working out okay for them. So how much more of that is going on, and how does that affect the real estate communities that we're in, whether the residential communities or commercial communities, the infrastructure items that go along with that, right? You have more young people moving to different places. Are there enough schools? Do they have enough room? Are the roads and the sewer systems and the electric, systems able to handle that boom in population in South Carolina and North Carolina and Arizona and all these other places. So those are the things that are in our survey. The committee that does this every year changes. The committee we had last year was populated with about a dozen members from different parts of the country and the world in different disciplines. So they were all in tune with different issues. This year's committee is going to have an interesting challenge ahead of them. They're meeting now, and how it works is they meet, they identify, let's say, several dozen items that they think are top issues and trends. They
Right.
then send a survey out to our 1,000 members. We respond. They
Oh,
review
interesting.
that, and then they retool and decide what the top 10 are, and they rank them. And the reports are then written up by that committee, and each one of the top 10 issues is assigned to one of the members who writes up a little summary of it that goes up on the website and creates information for folks who are interested in it to grab off the website for free. And then there are presentations done about it around different places as well, as I said. So
That's fantastic. Well, let's back up. There's so many topics I want to back up on. Let's go back to affordable housing and particularly this idea of churches or schools or cities or any number of people giving their property away, because right now actually I'm involved with the local Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of San Mateo, and we have 133 affordable senior units now in two buildings, and we're adding another 50 units. Anyway, long story short, the whole tax credit approach is one of the best ways for affordable housing to be developed. So I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about what you're seeing in that field in terms of
well, we I think have the whether it's the fame or we're infamous because of it. The main affordable housing constitutional law case came out of New Jersey, the Mount Laurel case, which
really?
around the country it's called Mount Laurel Housing because of a town called Mount Laurel Township in southern New Jersey that was accused of having exclusionary zoning practices back in the 70s. And the case went up to the Supreme Court. There are actually 3 different Mount Laurel decisions from our state Supreme Court, all of which hold that it is unconstitutional for towns to not allow and incentivize the construction of low and moderate income housing in their communities. So how we do it here is that we've been through a couple different edifications of this since the early 80s when the first Mount Laurel case was decided. But basically, there are ways in which people in New Jersey can solve affordable housing problems with their towns, sometimes with their cooperation and other times adversarially. So one way to do it is to have something called a builder's remedy lawsuit, where if you're a developer and you believe that the town has not met its affordable housing obligation, you can sue them, have a court say that their zoning is exclusionary, and then in the court case, have the court provide a remedy which gives you the density mixes that you need to make the project pencil out. We also have what's called inclusionary development here in New Jersey, where typically zoning bonuses are given to private developers if they agree to take either 15 or 20% of the total number of units and restrict those from an income standpoint, either for sale or for rent. And then they get 80% market rate units. And if the town upzones it to give enough density, they might achieve the same, density they would have achieved for market rate units by the bump that they get for the inclusionary project. And then we have a system here that it used to be run by an administrative agency that was disbanded by our last governor. We now have the courts enforcing the numbers. So you have a need number in your town that says you need to provide 750 units. And you can do that either by zoning for it, or you could find financing and build it yourself, right? And there's a variety of tools that are used to incentivize the private sector to do the inclusionary projects, because the tax credits don't work for that, right? That's 100% affordable project that you get the low income housing tax credits for those.
Right, right,
The 80/20s don't. There have to be other ways in which the gaps can be closed. And it's usually done, as I said, through upzoning to give the private sector incentives to build more for-profit units so that the affordable units are kind of like a wash where they have to build them and they don't lose
right,
money on them, but there's not a lot of
right.
profit in there and they make the profit on the other part of the deal.
Wow.
So that's the way we do it here. And I think a lot of other states are in similar places. I don't know how they are administered and how active of a role their courts have. Ours are very active to the point where in the development community, at least for residential in New Jersey, in each county, there is a judge in the Superior Court, and there is a professional planner appointed by the judge to be a special master over the affordable housing issues in
Oh,
that
really?
county. And then they bring in all the towns and they kind of dish it out and say, hey, you need this many units, you need that. There's a report that considers the population demographics and decides what
Mm-hmm.
opportunities they already have, how many units have they supplied, how many more than they need. And all of that stuff is done administratively. And then there's court overflow work for it as well. So we're really involved in it. It affects my work primarily on the eminent domain side because it's very common that towns will use eminent domain to take property to provide affordable housing,
Oh,
whether it be 100% or in some cases, the local redevelopment laws are used to do inclusionary projects where there's an affordable housing set aside. So we come across it a lot in our work. Even though we're not developers here, we're just lawyers that represent them.
right, right. Well, it does sound like New Jersey and California are in sync. We have what's called an housing element. I don't think it's administered by the courts, but more by the state anyway, and a very similar. There's been big battles between the state law, which allows more density and overrides the local ordinances. And so there's been this kind of battle between the cities and the state about how much property or how much development can go on a particular site. But in most cases, I think the state has won, and so more housing has been developed. And sometimes, although I don't think it's being used as much anymore, they would condominiumize the development so that you'd have an affordable condo section of the building and then
Right.
a market rate one. So anyway,
That's same way it's done here. And again, it might be implemented slightly differently, but the same outcomes are there. And I actually have a sister who's disabled, and she lives in an affordable rental project that is 1/4 of a multifamily community. The other 3/4 are market rate townhomes. And then there
right.
are these 2 buildings or 3 buildings where she lives. It's lovely. It's really nice.
Oh
There's a
yeah.
long waiting list to get in because there's not enough of them around, right? But it has worked for her, and we were happy and thrilled that she qualified to get in, and she's happy there. So
Yeah, no, I mean, it's the same way with our Rotary Club. We have a very long waiting list to get in. The price is very affordable, and it's a very nice building and community to live in. But obviously, there's just not enough. And we just had a speaker at HIP Housing, which is a local nonprofit affordable housing group, that basically his thesis was that all these different elements between drugs and homelessness and mental health are issues that need to be dealt with. But the biggest issue is there's not enough housing. So if you had more housing, then these other elements would be less contentious. So,
well, if we go, Bruce, if we go back to the top 10 issues in real estate from the Councils of Real Estate, the lack of housing was the broad topic, and it's really um, it's really important to understand that we don't just have a shortfall of income restricted housing that's regulated by the government in some way. We
right,
have we have a lack of housing supply in all sectors of the market except perhaps the luxury market, right? So
right,
that, if you are a young couple and you're starting a family and you rented an apartment in a city like San Francisco or New York, and now you want to move to the suburbs because you think the schools are better and you want a little land and some space to raise your kids and have them play, how do you get into that house when the starter house is $800,000,
right.
right? And there's not a lot of them for sale.
No, no, exactly.
So that's the problem. As much as the government regulated housing market is a problem, I believe that what I call the starter market is a big problem because of the lack of affordability, especially now that interest rates are higher than they were. So if it's someone's renting an apartment and for the first time they're going to get a mortgage, it's going to cost them 40, 50, 60% more today than it was going to cost them 3 years ago for the same mortgage payment,
Yeah.
right? Just because of the change in the debt service. That is coupled with, I'm sure you know it's the same in your state, rising other expenses related to real estate. Your property taxes keep going
Right.
up. Your hazard insurance has gone up, right?
Oh,
Whether you live
way
in a
up,
place
way up.
that has tornadoes and hurricanes or not, all of your insurance for homes has gone up everywhere around the country. And our costs of energy are increasing. So, when you have a house now and you have to heat it and cool it in a place like where I live, where it gets hot and cold, right?
Right.
We need
Right.
heat and air conditioning in New Jersey and New York. Um, it's not unusual to have $1,000 utility bill
Oh,
for a
wow.
month.
Oh, wow.
Add that to your monthly nut.
Right.
So I think that the attainability of housing and affordability of housing are two enormous issues that we've just begun to scratch the surface of how to tackle them. Knowing, if we go back to those demographics that I talked about, knowing that the millennials are now at the point in their lives where they have families or are starting families, they are more likely to want single family homes
Right.
than apartments because of that dynamic, and there aren't enough of them.
Are you seeing in New Jersey these new developments, well, newer developments called build to rent or whatever tagline you want to call them?
We don't have a lot of built to rent. What we are seeing though, at least in our state, because there's not a lot of land, and built
Right.
to rent typically requires open spaces and land where single family homes are built, and then they're owned by these days institutional private equity companies own a lot of them.
Right.
Um, what we are doing is we're knocking down office buildings and building housing on them, at least in the suburbs, because they're
Right.
underutilized, because of all the things that we know about and talked about. So just down the street from my office, which is my office is in a what I'll call a corporate bedroom community. We're a New York City commuter town with a train, but there are a lot of large corporations that have headquarters here, and it provides a stable workforce. And just down the street from my office on a state highway, a busy state highway with 3 or 4 lanes in each direction, there was a two-building Class A office complex that housed local headquarters. I think it was for Intel Corporation.
Oh, wow.
And those buildings were probably built in the late 80s or early 90s.
Right.
They
Yeah.
were knocked down, and they are now the site of I think it's an 800 unit multifamily housing complex with a hotel, a couple of restaurants. There's some experiential retail on the first floors of the buildings, and it's going up right now. And it's one of those things that the town had to go through some zoning changes to allow all this to be built on
Oh,
a busy
right.
highway. But there are people that are my age, empty nesters that are in their 60s that are selling their house in the burbs and moving into these apartments.
Yeah,
So
no, it's kind of a two-way street. The older generation is moving, downsizing, and the younger generation is trying to upscale into these units. And the same thing is happening here, whereas in New York City, a little different configuration is happening where they're trying to hollow out the big office buildings and convert them to residential, which that in itself is an interesting proposition. So,
it is. I've seen some of those buildings. They're fascinating inside. My younger daughter lived in one of those conversions. Her first apartment out of college a few years ago was one of those residential conversions in the
oh,
financial district. So, yeah.
yeah. Well, this is a very interesting conversation. I think we could go on for another couple days. Where can people get a hold of you, Anthony?
I think the easiest thing is, since I have a long name, just to go to my website, which is mrod.law. My email address is here, but you can get to me through that. There are links to connect with me. As I said, my practice is very, very limited in its geographic scope intentionally. We only go in New Jersey, but we have the benefit of the two national networks that I've discussed with you and your audience, where we can help people around the country. And if from the council's real estate perspective in other parts of the world. If they got real estate problems, I think we can get you in good hands, and I'm always happy to help. And I have a lot of confidence in the networks that I'm part of. They're all top level people, and we know each other well and see each other regularly. And I even had mentioned to you during our initial discussion before we went live, the council's real estate is unique because it has a band too, and I'm in the band, and that makes us even closer as professionals because we jam together and then we exchange war stories about our work. So
No, that is a fantastic adjunct to your particular association, because I don't think there are very many that have bands that play together. So that's fantastic. That's great. Well, very fun and interesting to talk to you. I look forward to maybe we should talk again when your top 10 comes out again for 2025.
I can definitely let you know that, and typically what we do, Bruce, is either the acting chair of the organization at the time or a local member who was involved in the workings of the committee may come and do the presentation, knowing that they may have a closer tie to your geographic area or areas. There almost always is someone from Northern California involved, and we could definitely hook that up for you, whether I did myself or not.
We can figure out some way to do that either with 3 people on the call or 2. It'll be fun to put that all together.
Would love to. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity.
Look forward to it. So
That's a wrap on today's journey through the SF commercial real estate scene. Ready to share your story? Visit sfcommercialconversations.com/guest. Your insights could lead the next conversation.